This is a peek at our room before we started painting. Now this is not a great clip because I didn't get too much of the walls. I actually filmed this for something else and then I forgot to actually film the walls before we started tearing everything apart. So you are just stuck with this. To start off, you'll see that we have a lot of like these cracks. There's also some sections of the walls that just were very uneven because of cracks, so we tried to fill them in with putty, and then after this, I filmed this clip, I sanded them down. As you'll see in a minute, Kane and Aubrey helped me sand down all the cracks. The ceiling was probably the worst part, and that's because an electrician had walked upstairs in the attic at one point and caused those cracks. So it originally wasn't that bad. So we have a lot of marks on this wall that we haven't sanded that you can't really see yet. But this is what we're starting with, and I would like to point out this is not a decorating video, so this room will not be decorated at all. In the end, it'll just be set up for practical use, and the decorating and decor will come later. As you can see, my crazy hooligans playing on my bed.
It goes all the way up there. A crack. I have two cracks. I have crack by crack.
This is the view of the room when we were done patching and sanding all of the cracks and little buckles in the wall. Obviously after we sanded it, it actually looked a lot worse because it was definitely pronounced where all of them were, but it actually worked out better in the long run because once we painted, it was a lot less noticeable than it was before we painted. The cracks that were present before were still there to a certain extent, but definitely not as raised or as noticeable. The biggest change was the ceiling. The ceiling was really bad and really noticeable before we painted, so I will show a clip at the end showing the big change with that. And I would like to say that Sean did actually do some of the filling in before we started filming. So when we were filming and there were some of the holes patched, that was actually him. And then he also got me this edger, and it is super nice. I will try and find one and link it down below. I hadn't used it, so I wasn't the greatest or the most proficient at it. But once you get the hang of it, it is so helpful and it is so much easier than using a brush. So I will definitely link that down below because that was a huge help in our transformation. I will say this is like the most satisfying part, is like doing the edges like this in film. I should have done it up close so you could really see the transition up close because it was super satisfying at the time. And then Aubrey wanted to help roll, so here you can see we got quite a bit of the walls done at this point. And she came in and she got the little roller out and started rolling. She loved it and had a blast. She actually helps us paint the hallway later on. In the next week she wanted to help roll again when we were painting the hallway, so she helped us do that as well. And I also want to point out that we are painting the ceiling and the walls the same color, and I'm so glad we did this. I think when you have straight walls that it isn't a huge deal if you want your ceiling to be, you know, white, as a lot of people do to make it a little bit brighter. But when your walls are angled, it is sometimes really hard to sometimes you're like, oh, maybe that wall should have been part of the ceiling wall, or maybe that is like part of the wall. And hopefully that makes sense. It's probably stupid, but sometimes I feel kind of like, oh, maybe that wall should have been painted the ceiling color, not the wall color. And so just painting it all one color really made it flow and not look as choppy, especially when there are so many different angles in our room, because both sides of the home has the angled, but then not the whole wall was angled, so that just made it even more confusing. But regardless of if my explanation makes sense, I'm really glad we did this You'll also see that I am just spot painting, and that is because I had an accident and I spilled some of the can of paint. And so we were short being able to paint 2 full coats in the room. So we did 2 full coats on the ceiling because that was where I did the worst job painting the first layer, and then we just went around and touched up all the other sections. Sean actually helped with this when he got home because he obviously can do the ceiling a lot easier than I can because I have to get up and down off of a stool. And in case you didn't know, I am actually currently pregnant, so that made it even a little bit harder. When we were done, we needed to clean up. I am also not completely done with this project because I need to get this stuff that my friend suggested to get paint off of the walls. Not off of the walls, we don't want off the walls, we want off the trim. Sorry. If you look, you can see that there's brown paint on the trim as well as white paint because the people who owned the house previously got white paint on the trim and they left it, and then brown paint got on the trim and that got left. And so anyways, we definitely need to get that all off to make it look more complete and finished. But right now I am just working on cleaning up and tidying. I would also like to point out that this project has taken us 2 days, not 2 days in a row. We actually ended up doing it a day, and then we let the paint dry, and we were busy, and so we ended up painting the next day. And you will also see that this room is not decorated when it is done. I did put a lot of things back, but none of the things that were on the walls are on the walls anymore from the first clip, and there is a reason for that. I know some of my film clips were kind of blurry, and I never did get a day shot of the room completely done, but you did get to see the color in the daylight. It was supposed to be more of a green color, but it kind of shows blue depending upon the time of the day. So sometimes we get the green vibe, and other times we get a blue vibe, but this is just how it looks at night. Regardless of the blue or green, it has brightened up our room so much, which is what we were going